Three, two,
All right.
1. Welcome to Waiver Watch, episode 2 on November 24th, 2019. Each week, we will review some of the most interesting waivers that have been approved by the FAA. We'll pull out our favorites and we'll describe them and go into some details. So before we get into that, we'd like to take a word from our sponsors who gives us an explanation of all these crazy acronyms the FAA throws out at us. And that one this week is NPRM, which stands for Notice of Proposed Rulemaking. And what is that exactly? It is a public notice through Federal Register that we have some rules that are being proposed to be changed. I know I'm using the words to define it, but essentially it's very simple. If the government wants to change something in a regulation, such as Part 107, they need to put out a notice that they're going to do so. So that is brought to you by NPRM, not National Public Radio, because we're throwing an M on the end. But let's get into it. This week's Waiver Watch.
Notice of proposed rulemaking.
Absolutely. So, Jakey, hit us off. Hit us with the stats. Love the stats.
All right. So the stats. The spieling of the stats. So we had 29 total waivers this week. Very productive week by the FAA. So we dig that. Had 26 107.29s as what?
No, keep going.
Had 26 107.29s daylight operation. We had one 107.35. That's a operations of multiple small UAS or one to many. And we had two of the 107.51 Bravos. That is the altitude waiver to get over 400 feet.
Awesome.
We did not have any 107.39s this week, the ops over human beings. So I guess Parazero, Indemnis, or some waiver contractors were sleeping.
Yeah.
One of the three. So.
They went on vacation. That's what they did. Getting ready for Thanksgiving.
It is almost the holidays.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see.
Thanksgiving to everybody in advance. But
yeah, it'll be interesting to see if there's a slowdown for approvals over the holiday. We'll keep track of that and let you guys know. All right, well, let's kick it off. Let's get into Northrop Grumman's 107.35. Jakey, let us know what's so cool about this one.
Yeah, so, the 107.35 operation of multiple small UAS that went to Northrop Grumman, Aaron Cherry, the responsible party. They got approval to operate up to 10 small unmanned aircraft. And so kind of right off the bat, Northrop Grumman, there are defense contractors, so this is probably not a light show type of waiver like the Intels and other ones. It's just 10 drones. And some of the, I guess, more unique provisions are they have to have at least 2 visual observers in addition to the crew. So could be a couple things there. Either maybe there was some physical sight lines blocked in their operational area, so they had to just position extra VOs around to see, 360 airspace, or maybe the FAA just wanted a lower ratio of VOs to aircraft, so 5-to-1 or something like that, to work with the crew and avoid aircraft.
Right.
Right.
So when people are operating multiple UAS per one pilot, what is that like? There's kind of 2 different ways to do it, right? You could have a series of controllers sitting out on your workbench or table for each aircraft, or you could have some sort of computer system that's controlling them all through some central dashboard, right? Jackie, in the future, we're discovering how to do this right now, improving the technology. In the future, where do you see multiple operation of a UAS by a single pilot? What do you think that's actually going to look like on scalable size?
Yeah, I think, ultimately the goal is to have very highly automated UAS, just kind of doing their missions with minimal intervention. So you'd have a central computer or kind of a brain sending out commands and each UAS executing them. But it seems like for now, as the concepts kind of get tested and companies work through this, they usually have, like you're saying, one transmitter per aircraft that maybe has like a kill switch on it or a return to home button or some sort of just easy
the
intervention to
the emergency backup,
faults.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. In the scenario where we really need to direct control immediately, if some systems are failing, we'll go for that controller, put it in the ground safely.
Right.
Yeah.
And the waiver provisions, talk about pre-programmed, and they have flight termination systems. And actually a really big one is that they can't interfere with each other. So if one of them has a fault, lost link or GPS or motor failure, whatever it is, they have to ensure that it doesn't cause this chain reaction and, crash into other drones or cause issues and, make a bigger problem. So there's usually a lot of fault tolerance and automation in these.
Right. And then, taking note on provision number 17 of this waiver, it's located at Northrop Grumman Mission Systems in Annapolis, Maryland. So this also goes to show the level of mitigations that they're submitting to the FAA, is saying, hey, we don't want to just operate these aircraft anywhere in the U.S. We want to be in this location. It's most likely a secured location, probably a fence or something like that, or at least somehow the public is restricted to this area. So these are all the things that when you're doing your waiver approach to how am I going to get approved by the FAA, you need to be thinking about your strategic safety risk mitigations that you're going to be applying. And again, this number 17 provision is clearly one of those that is always out there for more advanced things. Even with that Van Demnes parachute system that we saw approved last week, they had a restricted site access provision in there, which helps reduce risk.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So that's kind of it on that one, I think. So maybe we'll move on to the high altitude waivers, the 107.51 Bravos. So we have two of them this week again. Yeah. And they're almost identical, honestly, but the two recipients were Colorado State University Drone Center and an individual by the name of Stuart McAllister. Hopefully we said that right. And Colorado got a waiver top rate up to 600 feet AGL, and Stuart got a waiver top rate up to 800 feet AGL. So between the altitude and their locations, they're otherwise identical, same mitigations. So the FAA's taken a pretty standardized approach to these.
And to, expand on that too, like you're saying, the locations are different. But again, when they're submitting for their locations to go fly at 600, 800 feet AGL, they're sending in a specific coordinate, an area to the FAA to say, hey, this is where we're going to fly at this higher altitude. It's not a blanket, hey, we want to fly at 800 feet across the whole U.S. in uncontrolled airspace. So again, limiting the risk, getting the FAA comfortable and the operators comfortable with what are the levels of mitigations that are needed for these type of higher altitudes operations over 400 feet. So you can take a look at the waiver provision. It'll tell you, or waivers, it'll tell you exactly where they're operating. You guys can go punch those into Google Earth. Also on our website, we do have some screenshots of those locations, so you can kind of see how people are doing it.
Yeah, the two pictures. So Colorado's is kind of over a river, very smaller area. And actually Stuart McAllister's is right next to an airport. So, for risk mitigation, I'm sure he provided some sort of maybe listening to the CTAF or the airport frequency to listen for traffic, or maybe there's a lot of coordination with the airport managers or tenants to make sure those people flying in and out of the airport know where this guy is going to be operating and what he's up to. Yeah. So probably some level of risk mitigation there with the airport coordination.
It was, so I was operating at an airport and it was actually nice to hear people calling their approaches and they're taxiing out on the runways. It's so nice to have that radio sitting with you, because even before I even see them or hear them, I get a radio call and they're talking about where they are in relation to the runway. And it's so nice. It gives me plenty of time to be very aware of where they are and move my aircraft to a safe spot. So, necessarily being close to an airport isn't always a bad thing, because this is the one spot where people are actually announcing what they're going to be doing.
Right. Yeah. And I think listening is really important, but then, we don't do a lot of talking, right? I mean, I don't think there's any expectation, or really should be, for the drone operator to be actually making radio calls. I think that's only maybe confusing for manned pilots. and actually there's some FCC limitations as well with those ground transmitters that typically you're not allowed to. So
right.
We definitely encourage listening, but keep the talking either to a minimum or not at all. So
yeah, and I would say when you say minimum, I mean like only in emergency should you probably be transmitting from the ground.
Yeah.
Because even though you're not supposed to by the FCC, I'm pretty sure that if you're going to save some, fatalities or something, that will be very much overlooked. So, but let's move on to the next and wrap it up real quick here so we can get back to our regular scheduled Sunday night football games. So let's touch base quickly about that 107.39 that got approved last week. That was just crazy with the provisions.
Yeah. So, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, actually. But there was a 107.39 to, I hope we say it right, Ismo Media Productions.
Yep.
It was wild. There was provisions about being limited to anywhere, which makes absolutely no sense. There was a tether. There was a minimum altitude at the same as a maximum altitude. I mean, it was insane. We have it on our website. I think it was the 2 weeks ago Waiver Watch, but just go check it out if you want to see some of those. But what happened this past week that we noticed is the FAA took down the old crazy waiver and put up a new standardized like pair zero safe air waiver. Mm-hmm. So, and then they added a letter, right, Brent, to the end of that?
Yeah, so when they make an amendment to your waiver, they'll take the original waiver number in some cases, and they'll just add a letter at the end. So in this case, it was A. For instance, if they were going to do another revision, it would go to B, Bravo. So
exactly.
Yeah. So
that's a weird one.
Let's close it out here. But thanks for tuning in. And if you don't want to watch us on YouTube, or if you don't want to read us on the website, you can check us out on your podcast on your way to work. Maybe fire that up every Monday morning. Get your weekly digest of what happened in the FAA last week with approvals. So that's all we got today, right?
That's right. And a quick shout out to Matt Pesenius with the night waiver, one of our guys. So
absolutely,
he got his night waiver this week using our process. So
right.
Hopefully you go get some cool night shots.
Send them in, right? Send them in to us. We'll put them on the Facebook page, give you guys some credit. We have been keeping tabs on the operators that are approved underneath our process. We're checking your Facebooks and your Instagrams just to see what you guys are up to. Looks like you guys are being safe operators, so keep it up. Keep the good shots coming. We'll see you next week for Waiver Watch episode 3. Later.
See you guys.